In this report, I discuss what it really costs single expats to live in the Philippines. The word expat just means someone that moved away from their home country and lives overseas. Now I will explain the 7 behaviors that greatly affect the cost of living in the Philippines for single expats. I left the United States in 2007. I've lived in 67 countries over the last 15 years. I travel around the Philippines, interview expats about their cost of living, and share their video interviews with you. I'm in Malaysia today, but in 2 weeks, I head back to the Philippines for 1 or 2 years. I will tour around the Philippines and take you with me. After I describe the 7 behaviors that cost money in the Philippines, I'll provide links to the video interviews, and if you stay until the end, I'll also explain how to avoid buying expensive round-trip tickets, even though they are required to enter the Philippines and other countries. Okay, 7 behaviors affecting single living costs in the Philippines. Bar girl or the girl next door? Players versus monogamous? Alcohol? Men and boys and the price of their toys? Provinces or populated areas? Integrating into society versus living in an expat bubble? And staying home or exploring the Philippines and other places? Bar girls versus the girl next door. Bar girls is a polite way of saying a prostitute. The reason they call them bar girls is that prostitution is illegal in the Philippines. So bar girls are called entertainers rather than sex workers, and payments for sex are packaged as fines paid to the bar owner on behalf of women leaving their shift early in the evening. One source says that bar fines in the Philippines average around 3,000 pesos, which is $60 US, depending on where in the Philippines you're located. In 2 of my reports, the top 10 mistakes retired international expats make and how to travel the world safely, I explain why paid sex is even worse than you thought for health, safety, and budget reasons. I do not recommend paid sex, and these reports explain why. You see, there are plenty of girl next door types in the Philippines that will be interested in dating you just because you're a foreigner. I have an entire YouTube playlist on dating as an expat. All these things I mentioned will be at links I'll provide you at the end. So the approximate $100 per month you might spend dating a girl next door could easily explode by an additional $720 per month if you paid 12 bar fines per month to take home bar girls. So how much would bar girls add to your budget, you ask? In one of the interviews I share, an expat paid $1,284 to live in Dumaguete for a month. That expat is me. In that video, I itemize each expense, but since I was not single at the time, I will deduct $200 from that to arrive at a single base rate. So I will use $1,084 per month for my expat single base rate. I will now discuss how each of the 7 behaviors will affect your single base rate. A single expat that pays 12 bar fines per month would add $720 to their single base rate to get to their estimated cost of living of $1,804 per month. A single expat that spends $100 per month dating a girl next door would add about $100 per month for taking her out to dinner and entertainment. A single expat that was not dating at all would add nothing to the single base rate. So it would be $1,804 a month for 12 bar fines. Girl next door, $1,184 a month, or the single base rate if you don't date at $1,084 a month. The next behavior, players versus monogamous. Whether you decide on bar girls or the girl next door types, you have to ask yourselves, am I monogamous? Because eventually you're going to meet a woman that you think's amazing in the Philippines. That Filipina may turn you into a guy that prefers the girl next door. But does that mean you'll be monogamous? Don't be surprised if you turn out to be the same person in the Philippines as you were at home. If you start trying to entertain either multiple multiple girls next door, you're going to spend a bunch more money. I will make a guesstimate of the difference for you. If you are entertaining multiple women at the same time, you could easily add another few hundred to your monogamous monthly budget. Okay, for a single, again, remain single, it's $1,084 a month. For a monogamous, where you add 100 to date the girl next door, it's $1,184 per month. And for a player who is dating multiple women, but not necessarily bar girls, you're looking at $1,484 a month. Alcohol. Many of us drink adult beverages from time to time. If you like having a few drinks with your friends in bars in your home country, there's a good chance that you will be paying more for your drinks in the Philippines also. It also matters what quality and quantity of alcohol you drink. Just like home, there are many techniques you can use to reduce your alcohol costs in the Philippines, such as having a few drinks before you go to the bar, drinking during happy hour only, and drinking at home with friends. The cost of alcohol in bars also varies greatly based upon which city you live and how populated it is. Is it a tourist area? Most provinces, in fact, have very few bars. Larger cities, so people drink at home. Larger cities and tourist areas have more bars that are more expensive. So your budget will vary from about $50 per month to $400 per month for a single person, depending on quantity and quality and whether you're drinking at home or in bars. Domestic beers cost around $1 in the stores and $2 to $3 in bars and restaurants. If beers are $2.50 in bars, you would get 2 for 1 if you're drinking at happy hours. I subtracted for non-drinkers below because my single base rate included a $50 a month for home drinking. That's why my home drinker single base is $10.84. Now for a bar drinker, I added $200. So a bar drinker, $12.84, a home drinker, $10.84, and a non-drinker, $1,034. Right now, you'll see that I am just adding for each of these 7 behaviors one at a time. In the end, I'll show you what happens when you add multiple behaviors to your budget at the same time. Okay, province or populated area. If you want to live in the provinces closer to nature and further away from the city, your rent will be much cheaper. In the provinces, you'll find rent starting around $75 per month to $250 per month. You can pay more, but this is the middle range. Western style housing is not as common in the provinces. In more populated areas and areas near populated areas and tourist areas, the rents are much higher. Rents start around $200 per month for Filipino style housing near populated areas. More Western style housing near populated areas ranges from about $300 to $600 per month, depending on how large. Some people may pay more to live in what is called an expat bubble, which I'll talk about in a moment. Since our single base rate was in a populated area and not completely westernized, I will subtract 200 rents for my province estimate, and I'll add 125 for high-end Western. So for province, so the 3 rates I'm giving you quotes for: popular Western, population westernized is $1,209 a month. In populated areas with semi-Western, $1,084 a month, and province, $884 a month. Now these are your cost of living estimates in total based on those differences. Now, next behavior is integrating into the local community or living in an expat bubble. Some expats live in expat bubbles. They hang out with expats, they live in expat gated communities, they eat only in expat restaurants, they shop only in expat grocery stores, and buy imported expat foods from their home country. Bubble expats are trying to create the old life they had before moving overseas. Bubble expats almost never live in the provinces because they want to be around other expats. Plus, the expat restaurants, grocery stores, and gated communities are almost never in the provinces. Since expat bubbles are not in the cheaper provinces, the cost of living on the low end starts at around $1,500 per month for most expats living in a bubble. And that does not include a large home in an expat gated community. That just gets you semi-Western accommodations 1 or 2 meals per week in expat restaurants, and a few nights per week in expat bars. The rest of it, you're doing at home. Yet, a full expat bubble in a high-end gated community starts around $2,500 cost of living per month. Whereas single expats integrating into a Filipino community out in the provinces would start at around $600. This varies depending on how much air conditioning, it can go higher, alcohol and entertaining you do, and how big the spaces you live. Integrating completely means living in Filipino-style housing, buying in local markets, open-air markets, and cooking at home, eating in local restaurants, and hanging out almost exclusively with Filipinos. So a high-end bubble is $2,500 a month, a moderate bubble is around $1,500 a month, and a full integration in the provinces with Filipinos is starts around $600 a month. And all of these can go up from there. To learn more about integrating into the community, check out my report, Why Most People Do Not Retire Cheaply Overseas. Okay, staying near home or exploring, including the Philippines. I'm a slow traveler. That means I like to explore the world around me. So even if I rented an apartment in one place for a few months, I'm often taking weekend trips, week-long trips to nearby islands where I explore white sand beaches, waterfall, gorgeous mountains, and drive my scooter all over the place. I also fly internationally to visit my family and Chung's family in Malaysia, mine's in the US, every other year or so. So if you're not just staying put in one place in the Philippines, but are doing national and international trips, you'll have more expensive costs of living, obviously. Flying home to Chung's family in Malaysia is about $150 round trip per person. Flying to see my family in the US is about $1,000 US round trip per person during normal times. Island hopping in the Philippines is not all that expensive. Ferries are about $5 to $20 per person to move around the islands, depending on how far they're taking you in the ferry. And two-star hotels in the Philippines are around $25 a night. So you'll need to compute how much travel you will do to see how much extra you'll need to add to your budget if you're an explorer like me. You'll need to compute how much you will spend on tours. You can often rent a scooter by the day or week, or bring your scooter with you on the ferry for another $7 to $12 per ferry ride for the scooter. Then just explore to your heart's content wherever you go. Just exploring the Philippines one weekend per month could easily cost you another $150 per month. Double that if you start eating in expat restaurants, 3 meals a day, and drinking in expat bars. You may also need to add more if you start booking day tours everywhere you explore on the weekends. So if you are a single expat, add another $1,000 round trip ticket per year to visit family back home for a week or two per year. I'll assume that you stay with family, so I'll only add another $500 spending money for the trip home to my singles base rate. So for a explorer who's also traveling in the Philippines and eating expat bars and restaurants, they're going to spend that. The base rate will jump you up to about $1,509 per month, and that includes your flight once a year and your $500 spending. A moderate explorer, that's where you go home once a year and you have the spending money, but you're only spending like $150 when you go do weekend trips. That jumps you to $1,359 a month. And your single base rate, if you stay home, is around $1,084 per month. Now, are you a people pleaser, or do you know how to say no? It can be hard to say no if your beautiful lover asks for a new bikini, she sees window shopping. She may also ask you to lend money so she can help her mother pay her rent or pay a doctor's bill. If you have the money and you care about her, you may also want to help her mom, right? It would not be unheard of for you to spend an extra $100 or $150 a month in the Philippines to keep your lover or their family happy. So you need to have a strong mind if you're slowly depleting your budget you planned on having for emergencies. So for single base is still $1,084, but if you're giving $100 a month to the family, that's $1,184, or if you're giving $150 a month to the family, that's $1,234. Now, the difference between men and boys is the price of their toys. I received a comment on a YouTube video once from a guy that said he would be moving to Subic Bay in the Philippines. He would build a very large home and put a large day cruiser in Subic Harbor, along with wave runners and several expensive cars. He would eat out every night in expensive expat restaurants. He said his budget would be around $10,000 per month. Now, I don't know if he was real, but the point is there are people that can and do live that lifestyle in the Philippines. If you have that kind of money, I suggest you watch my video, How to Travel the World Safely. You see, playing the big man on campus outside your home country may have some consequences that you need to think about. But if you want to have some toys in the Philippines, you'll need to think about what they are, what they cost to maintain, and whether you should buy them in the Philippines or bring them with you when you come. Some toys just cost more here than they do at home. Big man on campus, $10,000 a month. Single base, $1,084 a month. Finally, I promised to discuss how these 7 behaviors can be combined to push your budget out of control. After that, I'll explain how to avoid buying round-trip tickets when you fly to the Philippines. 5 bar fines per month would add, at $60 each, would add $300. If you're a player, add a couple hundred. That means you have multiple girls you're seeing. It costs more to entertain. Bar drinkers, add another couple hundred. And if you're do more exploring, add 100 or 2 to that. And if you're a people pleaser and you give $100 a month to the family, if you add all that up, you're looking at $2,309 a month if you start combining some of these behaviors. Now, never move anywhere until you have visited first personally with a round-trip ticket so you can afford to get home to verify the living costs for your lifestyle and needs. Now, I'm not guaranteeing you any of these prices. These are just my notes and estimates from the time of my visit and this post, and from talking to other expats. Your costs will likely be drastically different depending on your lifestyle needs and are likely to increase after this post because of inflation. Now, more typical living costs that expats share online range from about $1,500 to $2,000 per month. Now, if you're going to try to retire cheap offshore, make sure to read my report, The 2 Biggest Risks of Retiring Early for Cheap Overseas, which explains why you should have emergency funds available for unexpected large expenses. Now, here are 6 videos that you can click and watch below. 500 US per month cost of living in the Philippines. That's one video. Another one, these are expats that I interviewed. You can hear it in their own words. $511 a month cost of living in the Philippines. $1,284 a month cost of living in the Philippines. That's the video that I used to get my base pay by dropping $200. The next one is retired early on $650 a month in the Philippines. And his rent in the Philippines is $140 a month. And then finally, $725 a month, retired policeman in the Philippines with a family of 7. If you'd like to hear all of our cost of living interviews, and make sure to watch our YouTube playlists for the Philippines. Okay, I promised how to fly to the Philippines without a round-trip ticket. You've probably heard you need a round-trip ticket to go to the Philippines. Well, that is still true. But many of my viewers don't plan on flying home, so they'd rather just buy a one-way ticket to the Philippines and just keep extending their tourist visa for 36 months. Well, luckily, there are companies out there now that will rent you a return ticket or onward flight leaving the country as required by the Philippines. It costs $12 to rent the ticket, and the rental period lasts for the time it takes for you to board your flight, land in the Philippines, and clear immigration. Then the rental period expires. Your name is actually in the system for that flight during the rental period. So if they check you in the system, but if you decide to use this rental technique, go to the airport 3 hours early to get your boarding pass. We have done this about 20 times and it's worked every time but once. So if you go to the airport 3 hours early and you get rejected, you'll have time to step out of line and buy a real onward flight to any of the nearby countries that are cheaper, like Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, or Cambodia, for around $100 to $200 per month. So hopefully you get away with the $12, but you might have to spend a little more if you get rejected. But we've only been rejected once out of 20 times. Now, thanks for reviewing my report, what it really costs single expats to live in the Philippines. Please subscribe to vagabondbuddha.com or our YouTube channel to watch us move around the world. 15 years and 67 countries so far. Make sure to grab a free copy of my ebook, How I Fired My Boss and Traveled the World for 15 Years. It has most of my best tips and tricks. This is Dan of Vagabond Awake, the YouTube channel for vagabondbuddha.com. Thank you for stopping by. The world is your home. What time will you be home for dinner? Hey, if you liked our video, please like, comment, or subscribe. Any of that would help our business. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Click the link in the notes below this video to get a copy of this content.